Hello, my name's Chuck Fall, and I am with Green Liberty, and you're at a Green Renaissance event that is hosting a meetup of four kind of organizations: Oregon Greens, Green Liberty Caucus, the Center for Truth Politics, and People for Democratic Revolution. And we're holding a series of discussions on what could make the Green Party a winning party. Last week, we had a presentation from the Banking Monetary Reform Committee, Howard Schweitzer, and now we're going to have a presentation from Emanuel Pastreich, Director of Center for Truth Politics. Just as a little background, participants generally agree that to make the Green Party a leader in a liberation movement and succeed, it needs to call for an egalitarian society that is eliminated rule by and control of the plutocratic power elite. The goal is to build a broad movement that can remove the rich from power and enable real and not fake democracy and advance a society that serves people and the planet. Participants will elaborate on this proposition and spin by their particularity and highlight key themes that could elevate the Green movement as a champion for a better society. Participants acknowledge that the plutocratic predator class use a divide and conquer strategy to control the public and keep them from uniting into a freedom coalition. How can we overcome this? So I'm going to turn it to Emanuel. I'll just remark that after that next week here at Green Renaissance, we will have a presentation from Mark Rolofson speaking to the issue of militarism, opposing it, empire building, opposing it, and ending national security surveillance state. And he'll elaborate on all of that. I will present, and then John Spritzler is coming up and will present on a radical egalitarian perspective. So, Emanuel, I am going to give you the floor, and please begin.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today from Green Renaissance, Green Liberty, and elsewhere. Much has changed in America since I wrote the article, A Green Party That Will Win, in September 2023 during my campaign for the presidential nomination in the Green Party. Of course, the United States was then, and it is now, a military dictatorship in drag, reporting through a covert chain of command to Wall Street, while posing as an open society that embraces democracy. But the decay of institutions, dating back to the 9/11 incident, and the destabilization of politics in general, from ideology to systems of governance, from values to symbols of legitimacy and authority, has completely destabilized the system, and the amplitude in political discourse has increased, leading to high levels of instability and failure. So we're not looking simply for a way to make the Green Party into a political party that can win at this point. We're trying to use the foundations of the Green Party, the assets, in spite of all of its corruption and ineffectiveness, under the rule of the Ben and Jerry's style progressive-minded businessmen and the Homeland Security anti-disinformation agents who run it now as the base, and make it into a base for a mass movement that goes far beyond the political party, offering a full alternative to not only the corrupt political parties like the Republicans and Democrats, Greens and Libertarians, but also an alternative to a bankrupt civil society, an alternative to a government captured by billionaires, and an alternative to an economy run for the profit of a handful of the super rich. That means real organization, real action, and a willingness not only to risk one's wealth and one's life, but a willingness to share with those who fight with us. We must be as well organized as any army and willing to take the risk and to sacrifice ourselves if we wish to make progress against the highly organized teams that we fight against, even as our actions are themselves peaceful. That means we must take seriously counterintelligence operations against infiltration and enforce strict discipline internally. Two historical events have taken place recently that have created an entirely new political environment in the United States. One that asks of us, will we take this opportunity or will we cast it aside out of sloth and inflexibility? The first event was the criminal bombing of Iran by Israel and then the United States, an effort intended to establish military rule at home and world war abroad as a means of enriching the few. The other event was the victory of Zohran Mamdani, a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, in the Democratic Party primary for mayor of New York City, beating out the billionaire-funded insider Andrew Cuomo, who did everything right in the corporate media and who embraced all the fictions of the Democratic Party. The bombing of Iran by Israel, and more significantly by the United States, even though it was to some degree political theater, was the final stage of decay in American institutions that leaves America without any moral legitimacy and opens up the real possibility of massive institutional collapse, like the fall of the Soviet Union, or, for that matter, the Roman Empire after Nero and Caligula. It also creates a dynamic flux that is pushing for world war on multiple fronts far beyond Washington, D.C. The U.S. military, whose top generals were dismissed over the last 3 months in an unconstitutional military coup led by Trump, although he didn't really do anything, then attacked Iran without warning, without any justification in international law or diplomacy, without consultation with international bodies or even with allies, without expert input, without consultation with the Congress in accord with the Constitution, and over the opposition of the vast majority in the military itself. Although, so far, a third world war has not ensued, and a little kabuki theater tricks have been used to try and claw back towards normalcy. We are looking at something akin to the phony war that was September 1939 to May 1940, after the German invasion of Poland, when the start of hostilities, oddly, did not gel into total war for 8 months. But we should not deceive ourselves. The attack on Iran has completely destabilized geopolitics, and it would be easy, in light of the push in NATO to massively increase defense spending right now, for a total war at multiple levels to break out at any moment. Moreover, in terms of information warfare and psychological warfare, the use of biological and nano weapons, total war is already underway everywhere around the world, just under the radar. So, when we consider how to create a movement that will win, that will take institutional and political control, we need to look at the response of the Democratic Party to Trump's attack on Iran. When the Texas Democrat Al Green introduced a resolution to impeach Trump, fully supported by the law and the Constitution, and based largely on Trump's unconstitutional attack on Iran, the majority of Democrats in the House of Representatives, serving faithfully their corporate masters, stepped in immediately to block even that weak resolution. Green's resolution stated clearly that, quote, President Trump's unilateral, unprovoked use of force without congressional authorization or notice constitutes an abuse of power when there is no imminent threat to the United States, which facilitates the de-evolution of American democracy into authoritarianism. Opposition to this statement was not based on values or interpretations, but rather a complete contempt for law and accountability. The majority of Democrats in the House of Representatives joined the unanimous Republicans to block the resolution. Every Democrat in a position of authority, from Minority Speaker Hakeem Jeffries to former Speaker Nancy Pelosi to former Majority Leader Steny Hoyer to former Majority Whip James Clyburn voted to stop the consideration of this resolution. In addition, the Democrats were not concerned with the illegality and immorality or the risk of world war from Trump's attack on Iran, but rather with the possibility that it would fail militarily and that he might have launched the attack without congressional authorization. Trump should be impeached by the book, according to the law, for his crimes. It is not a matter of politics or political parties, but the truth is that the Democratic Party itself is up to its elbows in blood from the COVID reign of terror and its support for massive repression at home and war abroad. It is incapable of serving as an opposition. Most of the members of the Democratic Party are active collaborators in state crimes and should be impeached themselves. The sickness has gone to the marrow of our civilization and requires radical surgery. Thus, now that it is obvious that the Democratic Party cannot play the most basic role as an opposition in any form other than as entertainment, we are tasked with creating a real opposition. We must go beyond propping up a weak and corrupt political party like the Green Party so that it gets 10% of the vote rather than 3% or 2%. That means creating institutions that can play the essential role of government in the upcoming period of chaos. The other critical development I mentioned was the victory in the Democratic primary for mayor of New York City of Zohran Mamdani, a man who called out Gaza as a genocide at a time when people were being arrested by ICE and placed in concentration camps for such statements, who embraced explicitly socialist policies and who focused on class issues to a degree that has not been seen in mainstream politics in some respects in the last 80 years. Mamdani's win demonstrated that the anger shown in the No Kings protests and other protests is starting to take a political shape, and it can be channeled into a revolution that cannot be contained by sheepdogs and agents like Bernie Sanders. Mamdani demonstrated that young people were willing to work day and night to support him as part of a larger political movement, and that they were not intimidated by the fascist takeover of the court system or the creation of a secret police in the form of ICE. Yet, although there is real support for revolution in America, and a party and a movement in opposition to plutocracy is just waiting to be born, it is extremely doubtful that Mamdani's victory will transform the Democratic Party. Already, former Treasury Secretary and Harvard President Larry Summers denounced Mamdani for not disavowing, quote, working to globalize infidada, and, quote, promoting Trotskyite economic policies. As the Italian philosopher Antonio Gramsci put it, we are in an age of monsters because, quote, the old order is dying, but the new order is still struggling to be born. That is the challenge for our movement. I want to address here now a critical issue that John Spritzler and I have brought up, but that many others hesitate to consider, even at this late date, as we careen forward towards catastrophe and war, and that topic is what I will call militant democracy. Militant democracy is the idea that there is a practical and strategic need for a radical defense of democratic institutions and the rule of law when it is under assault by fascistic forces who employ the qualities of democracy, such as freedom of speech, free elections, and transparent systems of deliberative government, as tools to advance totalitarian government and to destroy democracy itself. The locus classicus for the term militant democracy is an article by the German constitutional scholar Karl Lowenstein, entitled Military Democracy and Fundamental Rights that appeared in the American Political Science Review in 1937, the height of the takeover of governments across Europe by fascist and totalitarian political parties, a time quite similar to our own. The similarity between the bleak political reality that Lowenstein described and what we see today as the heads of NATO countries commit to raising defense spending to 5% of GDP and embracing a radically militarized and repressive political system goes without saying. Karl Lowenstein fled Germany in 1933 when he and other defenders of constitutional governance were subject to personal threats by the Nazi regime after it took power. Lowenstein studied different forms of democratic governance over decades and developed a new field of comparative constitutional law. That is to say, that Lowenstein was keenly aware of the specifics of how a militarized fascist movement took over and could not be defeated at home through attempts to debate laws or to contest actions in courts, as the foolish leaders in the Democratic Party are doing now. Because fascism depends on emotionalism, not rational thought or logic, and it treats the systems for democratic deliberation as mere soft targets to be taken over by brutal means. Lowenstein saw remarkable uniformity in fascist movements, and he recognized accurately that fascism was not an ideology or a political philosophy at all, but a technique for the hostile takeover of a government. Fascism, he noted, is similar in its, quote, hatred towards communism, Marxism, socialism, anti-Semitism, hostility to Freemasons, pacifist and similar international organizations, the leadership, its promotion of the leadership principle, and abolition of liberal democracy and its institutions, a hazy form of corporatism, general house cleaning under the slogans of regeneration and renovation, and rampant nationalism. Little has changed 90 years later. Lowenstein was unambiguous in his post-mortem of Germany and other states overrun by fascism. He said, quote, democracy and democratic tolerance have been used for their own destruction. Under cover of fundamental rights and the rule of law, the anti-democratic machine could be built up and set in motion legally, calculating adroitly that democracy could not, without self-abnegation, deny to anybody of public opinion the full use of free institutions of speech, press, assembly, and parliamentary participation. Fascist exponents systematically discredited the democratic order and made it unworkable by paralyzing its functions until chaos reigns. They exploit the tolerant confidence of democratic ideology that in the long run, truth is stronger than falsehood. He suggested that those defending democracy must form a common front, that democratic movements across the world must cooperate with each other as closely as the fascistic movements do. Most importantly, he held, based on his experience in Germany, the democratic forces cannot imitate the emotionalism used by the fascists, but that they must adopt a militant democracy that is organized and that denies democratic rights of expression and political action to those who use those rights cynically and strategically to carry out political warfare for domination. And that thesis led Lowenstein to make the following statement, which may be beyond what most in the Green Party or in the progressive and the left in the United States are willing to accept even at this late date, but which I think must be taken seriously in light of the moves of the Trump administration recently, with the full cooperation of the Democratic Party to militarize the entire state against its own citizens and to promulgate laws in the big, beautiful bill that make it impossible for states or courts or individuals to contest the empowerment of multinational IT corporations to use AI for social and economic control. Lowenstein says, few seriously objected to the temporary suspension of constitutional principles for the sake of national defense. During war, observes Leon Blum, legality takes a vacation. Once more, democracy is at war, although an underground war on the inner front. Constitutional scruples can no longer restrain from restrictions on democratic fundamentals for the sake of ultimately preserving those fundamentals. Leon Blum, the socialist leader in France in the 1930s, who inspired me in my own political battles, was entirely correct in recognizing that full legality cannot be preserved when one is under attack by fascistic elements. I hope that you will also consider the reality that we must become more militant, and that becoming more militant will ultimately mean forming not only a Green Party that will win, but a provisional government that will contest the authority of the criminal organizations posing as government in Washington while overseeing massive state crimes. Lowenstein concludes his article thus: constitutions are dynamic to the extent that they allow for peaceful change by regular methods, but they have to be stiffened and hardened when confronted by movements intent upon their destruction. When fundamental rights are institutionalized, their temporary suspension is justified. When the ordinary channels of legislation are blocked by obstruction and sabotage, the democratic state uses emergency powers, enabling legislation which implicitly, if not explicitly, are involved in the very notion of government. Let me close by touching on a few of the main points from the article, The Green Party That Will Win. The Green Party is large, and it has infrastructure and people necessary to serve as the foundations for a national movement against a rule by multinational corporations and plutocrats. It will win elections by putting all its focus on the movement and leaving the actual elections to the masses of mobilized citizens fighting fascism. To put all efforts into trying to elect a few politicians here and there by begging rich people with progressive pretensions is a recipe for catastrophe, and if the Green Party follows this foolish path, it will most certainly be made illegal and its leadership imprisoned in the years ahead. Time for us to start thinking clearly for a change. The party must be run like a democracy, but with protections in place to stop powerful forces mobilized by the super rich from infiltrating the party with operatives using homeland security anti-disinformation budgets to attack every effort to create a viable political movement. That means that the party must engage in active and effective counterintelligence work against Homeland Security, ICE, or other agents sent by billionaires to degrade our effectiveness. The Green Party must also become a national and international movement that embraces truth politics, that not only demands that state crimes like the Kennedy assassination, the 9/11 incident, the Federal Reserve counterfeiting operation, the numerous false flag attacks on citizens, and the COVID-19 reign of terror be made entirely public, entirely declassified, but that the rich who ordered these attacks have their assets seized to compensate for these crimes. Sweeping reforms of the military, intelligence, police, and government that end the criminal privatization of government and restore accountability must be demanded without fear or compromise. A Green Party that will win must offer concrete benefits to working people who make contributions or who volunteer. If a billionaire gives $100 million to the Democratic or Republican PAC, he or she will get billions and billions of dollars in benefits. If a worker gives $50 to the Green Party, all he or she will get is a vague sense that something might get better in the future, maybe. Workers who give hundreds of dollars to the Green Party, workers will give hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars to the Green Party when they think that they will get thousands or tens of thousands of dollars back in value, not only from advocacy, but from access to cheap and nutritious food, opportunities for work, housing, cheap or free medical treatment, and substantial education opportunities. The Green Party must become the government that does not exist anymore after the Trump gutting of social services, education, medical assistance, and welfare. Elections are not that important. The people will be loyal to the Green Party because it helps them run food programs that help them to survive, supports their community movements, sets up barter systems and shared resources like lawnmowers, automobiles, tools, and furniture, and supports true independent journalism. The Green Party can create banks, run as cooperatives, set up local energy systems using wind and solar that allow neighbors to sell power to each other without a middleman. When that happens, the Green Power will not have to lift a finger to get elected. Working people will go out on their own to fight for the Green Party. That new role for the Green Party means that it must value all of its members. The Green Party must make it clear that a homeless person willing to work many hours as a volunteer for the movement to bring down the plutocrats is more valuable than a Ben & Jerry's lawyer who gives $10,000 so as to ease his guilty conscience. Finally, the Green Party must adopt a revolutionary party. Finally, the Green Party must adopt a revolutionary position and take a brave stand to fundamentally change how government works, how society is structured. We must demand that everything changes now and do so without hesitation or compromise. That demand itself, that everything changed, is a word act. It is like a judge pronouncing a couple, husband and wife. It is just words, but by the very nature of the pronouncement, it will fundamentally alter everything. Thank you very much for having me.
Emanuel, thank you for your wonderful presentation. Very comprehensive, wide-ranging. I've made some notes. John Olson has his hand up.
Okay, good.
John.
Thank you. I want to commend you, Emanuel, for an eloquent presentation, and I'm very much aligned with the idea of having the Green Party be far more militant, far more focused, and willing to take on all of the issues and not just some of them, and taking reactionary positions on some of them. And of course, you're correct on your evaluation of the so-called Democratic Party. So, and I will note, I think we should pay attention to Bruce Ware's campaign in California running for governor. It might be good to invite him on.
That would be great.
I think he would be, he's doing some pretty good things. He's I think he's relating to the kind of approach that you're presenting here, and we just need to first consolidate. I keep saying this over and over. If we can consolidate, then we can win over. But if it's a group of people who just talking and having these discussions, which is all to the good. What we need is to have I go thinking like back to the original Martin Luther back 500 years ago or so. He said, "Here I stand," and that led to pretty much a fracturing of the ruling class at the time into a number of different sects, as it turned out later. But that's the kind of thing. And the second Martin Luther King, and he was clear, racism, militarism, and
Poverty.
The other third,
Poverty.
poverty, of course, yeah, obviously. So those are the three things, and he was absolutely right on that. And there's many eloquent people that we can emulate. So anyway,
John Olson, please, I'm going to interject. When you say consolidate, you mean ideologically settle in on a stance, a position, here I am. Is that what you're getting at, John Olson?
yeah, as much as possible. And in some places we might have some flexibility on this and that, but it means that instead of being a dozen or 15 people with each of our kind of slightly variation, we need to be able to come up with a consolidated position that we could then collectively take out to the world, and particularly to confront the existing Green Party structures and leadership, quote unquote, and basically, confront them. I mean, we haven't really done that.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, John. Very important points. Tom Rodman.
Yeah, thanks, Emanuel. I'm sort of modeling a little bit of some of the other groups, just kind of some feedback. Well, and first maybe a request too. It's pretty clear to me you were reading that, and you did a good job at largely not, like it didn't entirely seem like you were reading it. But
Sorry, that's not perfect. I realized.
Well, but here's my point.
I can't memorize a whole
No, I know,
text
but
like that.
yeah, but my point is that you do have the text, and that it's out there. If it's online and we can review it, we have something that we have a statement right there. That's not directly addressing what John is saying, but we can certainly use it. So
I can give it to you. I mean, I haven't posted anywhere, but I will send it to Chuck.
But Tom Rodman, your point is that Emanuel's speech perhaps rises to this consolidation of thought and idea.
Well, that's not my main point. I thought of that while I was expressing it.
Okay,
Sort of my other main point is that just giving you feedback, just the pauses, natural speech, right? Reading your audience. It's really hard in a Zoom call. You can kind of see our faces, but and I remember when you were presenting to medical doctors for COVID ethics, you were really kind of reading that crowd very carefully. And your speech was quite appropriate. You didn't, I thought you didn't alienate anybody. But yeah, I'm just trying to just give you some feedback about trying to get more acceptance. I think some more pauses, but more pauses, and maybe actually some rhetorical questions where you don't really expect us to answer, because what I found is I just had to concentrate every ounce on what you were saying, and then you have a certain rhythm in your speech, and after a while I have that rhythm completely memorized, so that it if I'm not careful, I'm not hearing anything you're saying. But I like the militant democracy thing. That seems to go back to the site. There's a lot.
I can share that the article. I have it in a PDF form.
Well, right, and you had a bunch of name references, and Leon Bloom inspired you, and those things would be helpful.
I mean, the article Lowenstein's on militant democracy. This is a tough topic. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy. Because his argument, and I don't necessarily take this position, lightly. It's not my preferred approach. But his argument is that when people start to militarize and mobilize to take over the government through fascistic means, that you better get mobilized on the same way, or you're going to be finished. And that means suspending certain aspects of normal democratic process, because if you let fascists use democratic processes, they will exploit them to the full. And this is not this is definitely not an acceptable position, I think, within the Green Party today, which is sort of like, open house, everybody, ideas, anyone can say whatever they want, do whatever they want. I think I'm suggesting here, I'm not saying I know in any ultimate way, I'm suggesting here that we're not in that territory anymore. We really are at war, and we better wake up soon before, we all end up in ICE camps.
Thanks.
Thank
And
you,
one
Emanuel.
one last thing. I appreciate the fact that you're covering the political scene and giving us sort of an overall high level analysis and what you did about the New York mayoral election.
Right.
Yeah. And then what was the other one? Anyhow, I appreciate all that. And, because I think it's important. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Good remarks. Mark Rolifson and then Brian Baker.
Thank you, Emanuel. That was a great, inspiring presentation. I've had a lot of the same thoughts going through my head in the past week, with the war in Iran and, the potential for this to break out into World War III. And I keep thinking, well, the Green Party is pretty marginalized. And what America really needs right now is an anti-war movement, a real anti-war movement. And the Green Party could be and should be creating a movement, and it could do it, through organizing anti-war rallies and really becoming the voice rather than worrying about just being a political party. Because the problem with just being a minor political party, even if you get a few people in Congress, you're essentially like, you're a little green tick on a giant nasty bird that one wing's Democrat and one wing's Republican. And the problem is the bird needs to be removed. It needs to be severed at the neck somehow. And replaced with a real democracy. And that's not going to happen under the current system where you have, a militarized deep state that's not going to allow for real change, because it has an agenda that goes way beyond things, and it controls the narrative, but people are, to shed a little light on it, I think what's really been a wake-up call that's inspiring is I don't think most Americans really have bought into the propaganda narrative about Iran having a nuclear weapon or wanting to get one. And it's not like it was back before, Afghanistan or something. The majority of Americans, including Trump's base, don't want to go to war. So there's an opportunity maybe here to galvanize support, because the other parties are not really opposing war, and they're certainly not calling out the like you mentioned Al Green's impeachment of Trump and how it got defeated. And there's no mention by Al Green that it was a violation of international law. They seem like neither party cares about that.
Actually, I was going to go into detail about that, but it would get too long. But it was disappointing. It was disappointing.
Let me interject and just observe that, Mark Rolifson, you will be speaking next week on the topic that you just highlighted, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so if anybody's watching this, Mark is going to elaborate on that. And I'm just going to say that this series was initiated by Emanuel and Mark, connecting and talking, and Mark's with Oregon Greens, which is a dissident group in Oregon that's alienated. Well, we're not alienated. We got the establishmentarian side of the party is alienated from us and won't let us in to participate and talk together. And so we're doing our thing. We are being, as Gandhi says, be the truth.
Well, Chuck, I want to make, Tom gave me some advice on rhetoric, and I maybe give you a little bit of advice. We're not alienated, by the elites, right? We're with the people. We represent the mass majority of the working people of the United States. They have alienated themselves from all of us, and the only issue is how do we correct the system so that we actually play the role that we are entitled to. And that, of course, is democratic, but it's also scientific truth, right? That scientific truth is not voted on, and that's essential for us to put forth.
Okay, good point. So thank you for that nuanced distinction. So in any case, Emmanuel and Mark kind of inspired this simple question: what would make the Green Party a winning party? And this is really very nuanced. I mean, there's so many layers to this onion, and and again, so let's go to Brian. I'm kind of have a thought. I'm going to make some remarks, and I want to loop back to the idea of consolidation that John Olson introduced. And I do want to hear from John Spritzler and reflect, because we're all he will be presenting kind of at the end of this. But let's go to Brian Baker, and then I'm going to make a remark. Raise your hand if you, or if say something in the chat if you want to participate and say something in question. Brian Baker, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, little background.
Your audio is weak.
Is weak. Okay, let's see if I can boost it.
Okay.
Is that any better?
Sounds good.
It's good. Yeah, no problem.
Is that better?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, a little bit on my perspective before I ask a two-part question. I was, I was a teenage Republican. I was raised in rural northern Appalachia. My father was career military, National Security Agency, by the way. And I have something of an understanding of the ideology and the mindset that goes with the supporters of Trump. Their predecessors with Reagan and Nixon and so forth. Yeah, I mean, I talk with them still, family members, community members. And something that Abby Hoffman and Steve Bannon agree on is that politics is downstream from culture, and that people often vote against their economic interests for cultural reasons. Have a cultural affinity to supporting politicians who promote that worldview, and that has to go with the fact that America never was a democracy, as my father constantly reminded me. It was always a republic founded upon some democratic and many undemocratic institutions. So the first part of my question is, how does the Green Party act to create a culture that is conducive with our ideals? And I see among those ideals nonviolence, which may or may not be consistent with what I was hearing you say. My second question is, what does winning look like?
Right.
Go for it, Emanuel. Please, those were to you.
Okay. So the first one about creating a culture is, I completely agree that it is about culture and values, and it has to be participatory. And at this point, granted the attack on governance itself, I think we have to look at the Green Party not only as giving presenting a model for a culture which is participatory, which is it consists of contribution, about putting society and others first, caring about others, but that is also serving as a government, a model for government, because government is essentially collapsing. And so the Green Party should serve as government. I mean, I really think that's critical. On the question of nonviolence and what to do going forward, I think you are correct in identifying a difference there. And I think it's one that we have to confront between different factions in the response to the current collapse in the United States. So I think it would be accurate to say that me and others like me do not completely disavow violence, that we feel that if necessary to organize in opposition to a fascistic state using ICE as a secret police, that self-defense and other forms of counterintelligence and resistance are absolutely justified, and they will absolutely be necessary. So this may be offensive to some in the Green Party who are sort of, hug everybody and we'll all be friends. But I think if you look at history, that people like me are more likely to be successful than those who go around and try and please everyone. The second question is what winning looks like. And I would say winning would be when we create a healthy society in which we are starting to organize and play the Green Party in its new incarnation, not the Ben and Jerry's Green Party today, in which it starts to serve as government. And when I mean government is not that it becomes a national security agency, but rather that it forms local communities, helps people to get food, grow food, produce energy, support each other, share, simple things like sharing lawnmowers or, tools, working together, teaching each other, making up for the destruction of schools by creating community schools, volunteering, etc., creating value. And that's what winning will be. So I personally, as I'm sure you've noticed, am not that interested in elections. I think elections are potentially of value, of course, but at this level of institutional decay, that elections should not be at the forefront in our efforts, but rather an effort to create alternatives in terms of economic and institutional support for communities. And when people buy into that, then they will support us. We don't have to tell them to go out and vote green, right? They're going to be like, I'll vote green if it's the last thing I do, because the Green Party or whatever the organization is, they help our kids get an education. They help me get food. They bring us together for organizational meetings to talk about local events. They help us to understand the world. They help me to get a job, etc. And if it starts to take that sort of form, that it's a movement plus a sort of social organization playing the sort of filling up the vacuum left by the destruction of government over the last 30 years, then I think we'll be winning.
And that means there's millions of people involved in this effort. And they're inspired by a common theme. What John Olson suggests is some kind of consolidation. And
historically, it's not unusual for a tiny group like this to put forth an agenda, which then goes out to millions of people. What's called the avant-garde, or the what's the word Vanguard. This is standard, and we should not be discouraged by that. So the fact that we're all white males, we're all sort of similar, sort of obsessive personality types, this should not discourage us at all, because it's not going to be us who change the world.
Wait. I think there's me, there's Bonnie, and there's Judy. So, okay.
I'm sorry. I can't see you on the screen here.
there's a few of us here. It's okay.
The women are all hiding. You're all hiding. I like women, actually. I like to look at them even.
And we are at a Green Renaissance meetup, and we have people from all over the country, and we're not all just white people.
That's obviously the case.
So let's go to John Olson, back to Tom, and I want to make some remarks.
Okay, well, thanks. Okay, hearing Abbie Hoffman reference, I'm old enough to remember when he was doing his thing in the 60s. If he was alive today, I'm going to sort of channel what I think he might do. He might come out with a press conference and say, given the fact that this society has failed us ecologically, socially, politically, financially, and others that we might even come up with, we're going to demand that the U.S. government unconditionally surrender. And we expect this to happen by next month, and we'll be watching. And of course, everybody would laugh, but it gets the point across that the government has failed.
Right.
That would be the kind of thing that he would do, and he was brilliant at that.
Well, John, that's a Green Liberty kind of thing to do.
I mean, nobody would take it seriously, but it puts on the agenda.
Well, you hope no one takes it seriously. You don't want the CIA and the FBI showing up at your door there, John.
Well, let's talk. We'll talk about. Okay, so John made a good point, playing the media, and I want to say that Emanuel, you interviewed Michael Stout,
correct,
and he described being at a protest in Pittsburgh, and a young activist was very eloquent and spoke strongly for the kinds of things we're talking about. And I'll just say this, that Green Liberty, the mission statement of Green Liberty is to advance a liberation coalition. Okay, by the way, it stands for demands accountability, transparency, and protection for whistleblowers to fight the corruption and the state crimes, which have rotted out the republic and made our society very, very corrupt. And so, to consolidate is going to mean that, and this is what John Spritzler said at his remark at the end of the Banking Monetary Reform Committee report, is that if the Green Party represented, just said, we're committed to removing the rich from power, so we're going to have real and not fake democracy, and have a society built on mutual aid, solidarity, and cooperative economics, and we're going post-capitalist because things are so rotten, just as John Olson kind of imagined Abby Hoffman saying, things are so rotten that we've come to a point, and I'll just make I'll just say we're at a point between having democratic destiny versus falling into a techno-totalitarian fate. And that's not hyperbole, because the COVID event represented a total demand by deep state on society. Lockdown, don't treat a COVID infection, get the shot when it comes out, and so on. It was a total demand, and so on. So and we are in an interregnum. This is a David Hughes point. And the interregnum is between what, Emanuel, you described, these different, is the in-between ruling structures, power structures. And
correct.
And the fact that the big tell here that there is an issue of an emerging techno-totalitarianism is on multiple points, but the big beautiful bill had that slip in, and I talked to my brother and we discussed that, everybody who slips something into a big beautiful bill on whatever, like the PrEP Act was brought in at the last minute to be passed. But it's that states and localities may not have any legislative oversight of AI. They have to accept the federal and so on. So there are so many important issues. And I'll just close with this, that I imagine that if there's 1 million people in a movement that have consolidated, that there are multiple layers of activism and engagement. There are people doing the social work that Black Panthers did when they directly provided nourishment and education. Because I think that we need to think along these lines, and you do think along these lines, Emanuel, and you're inviting the Green Party to get to not be just in a where we run candidates for electoral races silo, that the Green Party become a green movement. Now, this green movement.
But I just want to say on that issue, the Green Party running candidates means that the highest priority for people like Jill Stein is cultivating relations with wealthy people who have progressive ideas. It's not working with ordinary people. There's no motivation, and the Green Party is consistently. If you go to the Green Party and you say, I can volunteer 10 hours, they may use you, but you'll have no input. But if you can give $20,000, you can be invited to parties and hang out with the candidates. And that's consistently true. It's a Ben and Jerry's party.
Well, that be what it may be and it is infiltrated with people that kick people out. They spend more energy within the party keeping people from participating than building movement. So, and I've directly experienced that. But what we're talking about here is a green movement, and the Green Party should be in this green movement and should be speaking to the big, beautiful possibility of not having a dominating plutocratic oligarchy running things, because they've really fucked things up. They had the environmental warnings from Rachel Carson's Silent Spring to even Murray Bookchin 10 years before Rachel Carson observed that, boy, they're putting a lot of chemicals in food and in our and so on. And we, the people, are not asking for these things. We, the people, are not asking for AI. We're not asking for the ubiquity of toxins that have been just presented in just into society. So
I'd like to throw a log on this fire.
Okay. Well, let me just close out then, and
Okay.
we'll go to Gloria. Tom has, and so let me just close out and just observe that our movement is an indictment on the ruling class, and it should be, and that's how I'm kind of what I will represent when I get my turn, and after.
Chuck,
To say why I think coming out strong against hate crimes is a winning proposition.
Chuck,
Gloria, go ahead.
me. Wait a second, Chuck. I had to take my earphones off for a second, and I missed what you said about AI in the bill. Could you please repeat that? Sounded important.
The AI provision is that states and local cities may not have any legislative oversight. They have to accept the federal, whatever the feds say can go around AI development, the states must accept it. In other words, it could be anything from building a AI server farm in an area to regulating how AI is functions in the school systems, for example.
Okay, let me talk.
Okay, Gloria, go ahead.
I just wanted to say this dovetails to what Chuck's saying, and it also is something that Judy would be interested in. On the LOL show where we interviewed Debbie Lerman, she brought to our attention not only this unrestricted AI use, but also this unrestricted nuclear fuel use. This whole concept of building these massive amounts of nuclear reactors. And I thought that was really chilling. And then she brought out that Bill Gates just bought 3 Mile Island.
Gotta love it.
Bill Gates just bought 3 Mile Island. Judy, are you listening?
And is he not going to make it into
that,
a thing?
Judy?
Who did he buy it from? The government?
I don't know. We'll have to research it.
It was a private, as a utility.
You don't think he's going to turn it into a theme park?
He's gonna get his AI from 3 Mile.
Okay, these
You know,
are
and
these.
the other thing, I don't know if I
Yeah.
mentioned this, I mentioned it on the show, but Gary Null was giving a lecture, and he said that nuclear reactors do not have a long fuel supply if they don't get electricity. And he's greatly concerned, and he thinks we all should be greatly concerned that in the event of a what the electromagnetic storm or an electromagnetic charge, if there's any like massive loss of electricity, we would have these nuclear power plants just going off left and right. So after Gary's lecture, I did the research and I looked up all these various nuclear reactors, and what he said is totally accurate. Some only have a few hours of power redundancy. Some have a few days of power redundancy. A couple have, maybe a couple of weeks. But for the most part, like if there was a massive, power outage due to an EMF effect, what is it? Not EMF. There's another name for it.
Electromagnetic.
Carrington event.
Charge or something like
The
that. Yeah.
Carrington event that happened like in the 1840s. A
One
huge
happened
pulse.
recently in Spain, and they lost electricity, or Portugal, somewhere around
To
there.
take out all the power
Recently.
No,
transformers in the
that
continent.
was because of green. That was because of green energy. They lost it because
Let's
of.
wait. Let's not. Okay, thank you.
But anyway,
yeah, I
the
still have
main
my hand
issue
up.
is that
Yep.
if there is an outage, we would have all of these emergencies going off concurrently. If it was, in the United States, even if it's regional, it's bad. And it's not a good situation because you have to keep your fuel rods cool, as we know, in addition to keeping an operating plant operating. So it's serious stuff. So the concept of even building more and more and more when we've never addressed the issues of the ones we have, it's just nuts. And that's in the big Build Back Better. No, it's in the Big Beautiful Bill. They love bees. What is this?
It's the
Build Back
Donald.
Better, Big Beautiful,
No, it's the Donald.
They
That's the
love
Donald.
all these bees. I don't know.
Okay, let's
Thank
go.
you.
Well, but so the AI issue there is, if the authorities really were concerned about global warming and the production of heat from making energy, they would be not going whole hog to build out these AI farms, because these AI farms are using as much power as a city. It's just, and there's hundreds of these online. And so I don't want to go, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, but this is an important issue and theme that the Greens should be leading on, and they're relatively silent. I haven't read anything. So let's go to Tom Rodman and then Mark Rolifson. And we're coming up on an hour and a half. I do want to, I'm going to pick John Spritzler's brains for a reflection in a moment. Mark Rolifson, what is your thought? Tom Rodman and then Mark.
Yeah, so I like the tag, the Ben and Jerry's party. That's good, and I think that well, it hasn't the DSA has tried to do this. They have this concept of mutual aid, and this sort of dovetailed possibly with this thing that happened a couple nights ago. It's funny, well, the cat's away, the mice will play. So the moderator wasn't in the Zoom, so it went on for 4 hours. And
which discussion was this? Which
was
meeting?
this was medical doctors, and so Stephen Frost. So I used to take over with a Telegram group. So I drew this woman out. Or anyhow, long story short, she's involved in these councils of 12 in Wales, and they have them organized in all these villages all over Wales, and they're like parallel governmental structures. And she's in last September, she got 250 people to show up at a village hall. I had to ask her what the heck a village hall was. But part of this grew out of the Stand in the Park movement, which was in Europe during COVID. People would meet at 10 a.m. every Sunday out in the park and just talk. And the other, I don't understand this whole thing, but part of this goes back to the IRB, whatever that is, Irish Republican, and I don't know what the B stands for. And they are also very focused on natural law. And this is all twisty-turny, but I'm going to tie this into a talk I just had with Mike Zarzano this afternoon, and their level of activism. They had a grand jury subcommittee, an informal, non-recognized committee that met this afternoon, and they are focused, some of them within that group, on common law. And so in England, it seems to be natural law more than common law. And their form of activism involves focusing on states like Oklahoma, Kansas, and Florida, where the citizens can call, petition the governor to ask the Supreme Court to have a grand jury. And so, yeah, as Chuck knows, they were successful in getting 2 grand juries done. And the one that they did on immigration, they found out so much. They had a 350-page report on it, and the jury was so disgusted by what they found that they requested an extension or a new grand jury. So I know this is all over the place, but this idea, could we do some sort of parallel? Could we like coordinate all these volunteers by but we'd still have the structure of the Green Party and encourage people to join and give them, maybe look at it like a parallel, a parallel lobbying structure to exert pressure locally, but at the same time do just what was said, in that we be trying to help the communities with projects and doing the mutual aid and so forth.
But we
as
need
Emanuel said.
hundreds of thousands of people participating because
Yeah,
they,
so we need a structure. Then I like this idea of a council of 12, and some
Right.
of this goes back to this guy in 1916, William McGregor, I guess. So anyhow, I'll try to find out more about what's going on in
well,
Wales.
so maybe we'll have John Spritzler just explain how in the egalitarian project, part of the activism is for people to be meeting up locally and being in the consciousness of what is the movement. And maybe you would just make a remark. I know you have an essay on that, John, but let's go to Mark Rolifson and then have John Spritzler respond to this idea of a council, and there are people who are doing that kind of activism. Mark Rolifson, your
Yes,
thoughts?
maybe Gloria can answer this. I mean, I'm a little confused because I thought nuclear power plants, or they're producing electricity. So how can the reactors run out of electricity? That's
It's
what
when
I'd like to-
they have to do a forced shutdown. The control rods, just as Gloria said, they still need cooling. So if
Right.
they're not producing electricity,
Oh,
they have to get out. They have to be on the grid to cool their own.
right. So they have to have
rods.
another source, basically, of
They have to
electricity.
They're
have the
getting, no,
auxiliary
they're
source.
getting power from the grid while they're feeding the grid. So if the grid
Right.
goes down, but
Well, they don't really need it during that time, but
well,
they
no,
do
no,
need it.
no, they
Right.
do need, Tom.
No,
The
I don't think so.
nuclear power plant is a machine. It produces nuclear power, but all that Gloria was observing.
I'm just suggesting they can loop it back when they're producing it, but when they're
Right.
shut down,
I don't know
they're
if
not
it's that way. Okay, look at most of these
Yeah,
power
no, 'cause
plants
they-
have Tom, they have diesel engine backup systems to keep the thing operating if the grid goes down. That's standard operating procedure.
Not just that. They're also, if the grid goes down. There you go. You're right.
So let's not go into a
Okay,
rabbit hole
okay.
around
That's and the
nuclear
second
power.
one.
I'll
The
just
second
tell
one
you
is
that
AI. Because
here's
AI
the
is
fantasy, Mark. Let me just
All
the
right, all right.
fantasy is that it'll be legal to make mini nukes and you'll install them on site, and little nuclear reactors will be powering AI facilities. Now,
Right.
this is dystopian madness that our movement needs to call out. So we can have
It's being pushed
dedicated
around the
study
world
group.
now, actually.
Well,
that
we can have a
model.
dedicated group to do a deep dive into the nuclear issue and what's happening there. It's
Yeah,
a
there's
fine
better
idea.
nuclear technology now. The California won out. It was a political win. There was better technology right in the very beginning, but because California had leverage, the worst design won.
But so you guys, I just
Oh,
wanted
wait a
to,
minute. As far as AI, I just want to say one thing. You know, this is going so fast because I remember a few years ago there was on RT they had this little Elon Musk clip where he's going that when you're working with AI, you're summoning the demon, and now he's fully on board. It seems like, and we're seeing like they can make these videos that it's going to replace Hollywood, you know, and actors pretty soon the way they're going. This thing is going to be able to fake people saying things and everything else. It's frightening what's happening with AI, and it's happening so fast. And the fact that the government doesn't want it controlled and doesn't allowing, you know, people's input, community's input, that's completely, you know, undemocratic.
that's a tell. That's a tell on what their ambition is. So what I want to avoid right now is going into a technological deep dive into nuclear power. I don't want to focus on, we're going to end our recording soon. We can have a free form discussion and people can go and talk about the details. But the AI, I only introduce AI because for me, our movement is about resisting. And so this is about the Green Party being a winning party. The Green Party has a pillar called ecological wisdom. You know, what the fuck is that? Okay, is AI eco wisdom? You know, and so
Green AI.
the Green Party has the potential to be a player in history. And I'm just going to say that I agree with John Spitzer that the Green Party should say we're committed to an egalitarian society. Boom. Meanwhile, we're going to run people for office and use the candidacy position for bully pulpit to speak to the big, beautiful society we want to build, which isn't a technocracy. It's not run by mad scientists. It's not driven by militarism. And it's not controlled by plutocracy. That's what we're about. We need to consolidate around simple, clear messaging and then let people be active and build movement. That's where I'm at with this. So, and I'm passionate about that. And I don't want us to get distracted and so on. And right now, the Green Party might be a dead party. It may, in fact, be absolutely dead. And that what we're really talking about is a movement that is transcendental to the political stuff. But we have available to us these tactical plays, running someone for office who would run as an egalitarian, who's for nature, return to nature, so we're not dominated by technocracy. So we have democratic destiny and we don't fall into dystopian fate. This is important shit to be talking about. Excuse my four-letter French words. John Olson, your hand is up. I got triggered somehow. But this is important, so important. I don't want us to go down into a how do we power AI and so on.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one quick comment on AI, namely that the real danger is that it is used for military purposes and especially decision making. If decision making is taken out of human hands, we're in deep kimchi, as we used to say in Hawaii. I'd also like to say, yes, Chuck, we need. It just went on chat. I didn't unedited here. Yes, clear, simple messaging. That is consolidated position, beginning with our mission statement that we worked on, which may need to be upgraded now. But that's what I mean. When we have the mission statement for Green Renaissance, that was a consolidated position. That's the kind of thing we need to get out broadly and ignore what just went up on, because it was full of typos because it leaped out before I was ready.
All
But
right.
that's what I was going to say.
Thanks, John. So John Spritzler, so we're going to end our recording, but I'm going to ask people who are going to, Mark, you're going to just give us like a little advertisement on what you're going to present. John, Spritzler, what you're going to present, but Emanuel, you can have a closing remark and reflection on our conversation this evening. But John Spritzler, you have an essay, and it's tells people who are concerned about a direct democracy, people who want to build an egalitarian society, and you say, talk together in your local area and start to be in the consciousness of a liberation being from a plutocracy. What is that essay? How do people find it? And is that something that somebody who is in Florida or wherever they are, or Wales, leading on a 12 council thing?
Let me try to find it and then post it in the chat. Give me a second.
Okay. Let's go ahead and put it in the chat. So Mark Rollison, what are we going to look for? What do we get from you next week? Because you're going next.
Well,
give us an advertisement.
Things are happening really fast on the world stage. So I'm trying to keep up with that, is because I think it does tie into what we're doing, because the urgency for an anti-war movement is growing very, very quickly. And the Green Party and many in the anti-war movement even are members of the Green Party. And the Green Party does have a anti-war platform, which I looked at and I thought, well, it's fairly good, but platform's not enough, of course. But one of the things we should be doing, I think, is as far as the platform is, we should be calling for NATO to be disbanded, and we should have a movement around this, and people should show up on July 4th, which is Independence Day, at the next No Kings rally. Green Party members should show up and infiltrate these rallies with their anti-war signs and stop the genocide in Gaza signs, because we need to actually, convey our message that's not getting conveyed out there to the public. And I think that as far as the anti-war movement, the Green Party, it's essential for us to be out there and to be out there calling out the lies, just like I think Emanuel said, because it's too often convenient for somebody like Howie Hawkins to go along with the narrative that, Russia's invasion of Ukraine was unprovoked, when the facts don't bear that out. Russia was very provoked and saw no other way around it, because NATO has basically put a situation on Russia's border that amounts to a Cuban Missile Crisis in steroids, as like Jill Stein did say. But I'm gonna elaborate more on this in my talk, and what's the path forward, and if the Green Party can even really live up to this, because we're at a real turning point in society, and we're witnessing something which I think is it's not just about Iran, because Iran, China gets its oil from Iran, a lot of its oil. This is a war right now. If we went to war with Iran, it's about going to war against BRICS and BRICS Plus, which formed in 2023 with BRICS expanding, because BRICS is a challenge to the international banking system and the global financial elites, because BRICS is going to move away from the dollar in their trading and away from the SWIFT banking system. So this is like a war of the future. It's as far as it's a multipolar world, and I think the U.S. wants to stop that multipolar world, and that's not going to happen. I don't believe, because I think we're not as powerful as we think, and the American people need to realize that from our founding fathers, that who warned us against becoming an empire. They said, if you become an empire, you will no longer be a democracy, then you will turn into a surveillance state. So that's a little bit of what I'm going to talk about.
Okay, thank you, Mark. John Spritzler, did you post? So John did write an interesting, a long, lengthy kind of analysis of the, you know, the criticism of the plutocracy driving the war machine, driving wars, being behind all that we oppose. And take a look at that if you can, as you put together your analysis and your call to the Green Party to become militant in effect and provide strong leadership on you know, opposing militarism and building a vision for a peaceful world. I mean, that's people want they want the vision. I really believe that. So, John Spritzler, do you have a final remark? Do you want to give us an average? I mean, do you want to give us a different spin than what you said last time around what we can give us an advertisement for what you're going to report to this group on what could make the Green Party a winning party?
I'm going to talk about a lot of different tactics that all are for implementing one single strategy, which I think is the crucial strategy for today in the United States for building an egalitarian revolutionary movement. And the tactics will be things that a single person can do, that 2 or 3 or 4 people can do, that 10 or 20 or 30 people can do, that 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 people can do.
Intriguing.
And when you have an egalitarian revolutionary party, then you can do it on a large scale. But until that